Welcome to a new English learning journey. Today, you will listen to a real lifestyle story about courage, struggle, and personal growth. This is not just a story, it is a lesson about life. You will follow a young man who moves to a big city, searching for a better future. He faces challenges, loneliness, and failure, but he never gives up. With every step, he learns something new about the world and about himself. As you listen, try to focus on the vocabulary, the expressions, and the emotions in the story. You will improve your English listening skills, sentence structure, and natural understanding of the language. So relax, put on your headphones, and let the story take you on a journey. Let's begin. Ethan Miller sat on the bus with a small suitcase beside him. He was 32 years old, and everything he owned now fit into 2 bags. He watched the road through the window as the bus moved closer to the big city. The tall buildings were still far away, but he could already see them like gray shapes in the distance. He felt nervous. He felt excited. He felt lost, but he also felt hopeful. It was a strange mix of emotions, all inside one heart. Ethan was leaving his old town behind. Just a few months ago, he had a job, an apartment, and friends. He had a plan for his life. But things changed fast. The company he worked for closed suddenly. He searched for work in his town, but there were no opportunities. His savings went down every week, and slowly, everything he built began to fall apart. One day, he looked at himself in the mirror and realized he could not continue living like that. He needed a new start. He needed a place where he could grow. That idea led him to the city. The bus entered the city center after 3 long hours. The buildings were tall and covered in shiny windows. The streets were full of people walking fast, as if everyone had an important task. Cars, buses, and bicycles moved in every direction. It felt loud. It felt alive. Ethan stepped out of the bus and stood there for a moment, trying to understand his new world. He grabbed his suitcase and walked toward a small apartment he had rented online. The building was old, and the paint on the walls was fading, but it was cheap, and that was all he could afford. The landlord gave him the keys without saying many words. The apartment had one small room, a small bathroom, and a tiny kitchen. It wasn't beautiful, but it was his, a place to start again. Ethan placed his bags on the floor and sat on the mattress that came with the room. The silence of the apartment was deep. He listened to the sounds from outside: cars, music from a store, someone arguing on the street, children laughing somewhere far away. Slowly, he smiled. It was different from his old life, but different was exactly what he needed. That evening, Ethan went out to explore the area. The sidewalks were crowded. There were coffee shops, restaurants, street food, trucks, clothing stores, and small supermarkets. People wore different styles. Some looked rich, others looked normal, and some seemed to be struggling. He felt like everyone here was trying to survive, trying to build a life. That made him feel less alone. He bought a cheap sandwich from a small shop and sat on a bench in a crowded square. For a few minutes he watched the people around him: an old woman feeding pigeons, a group of teenagers laughing loudly, a man in a suit talking seriously on the phone, and a little girl running after bubbles floating in the air. The city was full of stories. Every person looked like they were living a different adventure. That gave Ethan a warm feeling in his chest. Maybe his adventure could begin here too. When he returned to his apartment, he felt tired, but calmer. He opened his laptop and searched for jobs. There were many opportunities, but all of them required experience or special skills. He spent 2 hours applying for whatever he could find. No one replied that night. He closed the laptop and lay on the mattress without turning the light on. The room was dark, but he wasn't afraid. He whispered to himself, "Tomorrow will be better." The next morning began early. The sun was barely rising when Ethan left the apartment with a cheap cup of coffee in his hand. He decided to walk instead of taking the bus. Walking helped him think. He passed stores opening their doors, workers cleaning sidewalks, and students waiting at bus stops. The city woke up early, and everyone was already busy. Ethan visited a job center. He waited for 3 hours before they called his name. A woman with glasses looked at his resume for only a few seconds. She smiled kindly but explained they didn't have anything suitable at the moment. She suggested he take some short training programs to improve his chances. They cost money he didn't have. He thanked her and left. Next, he looked for "Help Wanted" signs in stores and restaurants. Some managers were polite. Others didn't even look at him. A few told him to apply online, but he had already done that. After 5 hours of walking, he still had no job. His feet hurt. His coffee had gone cold inside the cup he was still holding for no reason. He sat on a park bench to rest. He wondered if moving to the city was a mistake. Maybe he had dreamed too big. Maybe life would not give him a second chance. He watched a group of people doing exercise together in the park. They looked happy and full of energy. Ethan felt the opposite, tired and empty. For a moment, he wanted to give up. Then he heard a voice behind him. "Long day?" Ethan turned around. A man about the same age sat down next to him with a friendly smile. Ethan nodded. "Yeah," he answered slowly. "Still looking for a job." The man laughed softly. "Welcome to the club," he said. "The city is tough, but if you survive the first month, it becomes easier." Those words stayed in Ethan's mind. If you survive the first month. It sounded like a challenge, a mission, a goal. That evening, instead of going back to his apartment right away, Ethan stopped at the public library. The building was warm and quiet. Many people there were studying, searching for jobs, or reading books. Ethan found a computer and continued applying for work. He spent 4 more hours there. His eyes hurt and his back felt stiff, but he kept going. At 10 p.m., a librarian announced they were closing. Ethan walked back to his apartment slowly. The city looked different at night, darker but beautiful in its own way. The lights from windows made the buildings look like giant stars. People were still walking, laughing, arguing, working, living. The city never stopped. Inside his room, Ethan wrote a plan on a piece of paper. Apply every day, at least 20 jobs. Improve skills, learn something new each week. Save money, spend only on what is necessary. Explore the city, do not isolate yourself. Never stop trying. He taped the paper to the wall. It wasn't just a plan. It was a promise to himself. Days passed. The same routine repeated. Job search, long walks, rejection, silence, and hope. Some days were harder than others. Some days he barely left the room. But he never stopped. Every night he looked at the paper on the wall and reminded himself why he came here. After 2 weeks, Ethan received an email. It was a small restaurant looking for a part-time worker. Not his dream job, not even close, but it was a start. His heart raced as he read it again. For the first time since he arrived in the city, he felt like the door was opening just a little. He looked out the window at the busy street below. The city didn't care about him, but it didn't hate him either. It was a place where people could disappear or grow. It depended on how hard they tried. And Ethan was ready to try. He whispered again, just like on the first night, "Tomorrow will be better." The next morning, Ethan woke up before the alarm rang. For the first time since he arrived in the city, he felt a small spark of motivation. He quickly washed his face, ate a simple breakfast of bread and tea, and looked at the mirror. His eyes looked tired, but there was a little light in them now. Today, he had something to do. Today, he had a job interview. The restaurant wasn't far from his apartment, so he decided to walk. The air was cold, and the city was waking up slowly. Delivery trucks were unloading boxes, workers were opening shops, and the smell of fresh coffee filled the streets. Ethan walked quickly but carefully. He wanted to be early. He wanted to make a good impression. When he arrived, he stood in front of the restaurant for a moment. The place was small but cozy, with warm lights inside and a handwritten sign on the window that read, "Family Kitchen." He took a deep breath and entered. Inside, a middle-aged woman with dark hair greeted him with a polite smile. "Hi, I'm Ethan. I came for the job interview," he said nervously. The woman nodded. "Yes, I'm Mrs. Carter. I manage this place. Come with me." They sat at a corner table. She read his resume quickly. Ethan wondered if she noticed how short it was. He had experience in office work, not in restaurants. She looked at him carefully. "You don't have restaurant experience," she said calmly. Ethan swallowed. "No, but I learn fast. I really need this job. And I'm ready to work hard." She stayed silent for a moment. Then she smiled. "We all start somewhere. We can give you a trial week. If things go well, you stay. If not, we part ways. Deal?" Ethan felt his heart jump. "Deal. Thank you so much." He left the restaurant with a strong sense of relief. It wasn't a contract yet, but it was a chance. A door had finally opened. His first shift would start the next morning. He promised himself he would not waste it. That afternoon, Ethan decided to learn more about restaurants. He watched videos online and read short tutorials about customer service, cleaning procedures, and basic food safety. Some things were confusing, but he kept going. He wanted to be ready. When night came, he lay down early. He hoped sleep would come quickly, but his mind was too active. He imagined everything that could go wrong. What if he was too slow? What if customers were rude? What if he made mistakes? At some point, he told himself, it's okay. Nobody starts perfectly. After that, sleep finally arrived. His first day at the restaurant began at 7 a.m. Mrs. Carter introduced him to two employees, Michael, a quiet young man with kind eyes, and Lena, a fast-moving woman who seemed to know everything. They both looked busy, but they gave him a quick wave. "You'll help with tables, cleaning, and serving food," Mrs. Carter explained. "Watch what the others do and follow their lead." The first hours were difficult. Ethan didn't know where things were. He forgot orders. He mixed up table numbers. He dropped a fork by accident and felt his face turn red. Customers were not rude, but most were in a hurry, and Ethan struggled to match their speed. At one point, Lena whispered to him, "Relax. If you're stressed, you'll make more mistakes. Just stay calm." Her voice was quick, almost sharp. But she was right. Ethan nodded and took a deep breath. He tried to move slower in his mind, but faster in his body. Soon, he found a rhythm. Take orders, carry plates, clean tables, smile. Michael helped too. When Ethan couldn't find a tool or a cleaning cloth, Michael quietly pointed to the right place without complaining. That small kindness made Ethan feel less alone. By the end of the shift, Ethan was exhausted. His feet felt heavy. His back hurt. But he felt proud. He had survived his first day. When Mrs. Carter gave him the schedule for the rest of the week, he felt a burst of hope. 5 shifts, enough to pay rent, enough to stay in the city. The following days weren't easy, but they became familiar. Ethan learned the menu by heart. He discovered that customers were happier when he spoke with confidence. He realized that smiling, even when tired, made the job easier. He also began to learn about the people around him. Michael worked 2 jobs to support his younger brothers. He rarely talked about it, but Ethan could see how tired he was sometimes. Still, he never complained. Lena was saving money for nursing school. She worked fast because time mattered to her. She didn't want to waste a single day. Even Mrs. Carter had a story. She and her husband built the restaurant together. After he passed away, she continued running it alone. Not because it was easy, but because it was their dream. Everyone in the restaurant was fighting a battle, silently and bravely. When Ethan understood that, he stopped feeling sorry for himself. He wasn't the only one starting over. Everyone here was trying to build a life. One evening after work, when the restaurant was closing, Ethan stayed to help clean up even though his shift had already ended. Mrs. Carter noticed it. "You know," she said softly, "many people quit during the first week. It's a hard job. But you stay, even when you're tired. That means something." Ethan smiled weakly. "I just want to get better." "You will," she replied. "Just keep showing up." Those words stayed in his mind as he walked home. The city lights felt less cold that night. The noise felt less heavy. The world didn't look easy, but it looked possible. Weeks passed. Ethan wasn't perfect, but he improved. Customers began to recognize him and smile back. He made fewer mistakes. Sometimes he even helped new workers who joined. He also began to explore the city more on his days off. He visited parks, museums with free entry, libraries, and open markets. He walked through neighborhoods with different cultures, tried new foods, and listened to music from street musicians. The city was still big and sometimes scary, but it was also full of beauty and life. For the first time in a long time, Ethan didn't feel lost. One night, when he got home, he took the paper with his goals off the wall and wrote under it, 6. Believe that better days are coming. He looked at the city lights from his window and felt grateful. Things were still difficult. Money was tight. The future was uncertain. But he was building something, step by step, day by day. He whispered once again before sleeping, the same sentence that carried him from the beginning. tomorrow will be better. The weeks passed quietly, almost rhythmically. Ethan's life settled into a routine that felt both exhausting and strangely comforting. He woke up early, worked long hours at the restaurant, returned home tired, and fell asleep as soon as his head touched the pillow. The city no longer felt like a wild storm. It felt more like a challenge, difficult, but manageable if he kept moving forward. One Saturday afternoon, after a particularly busy shift, Ethan decided to stop by the park before heading home. The weather was cool, and the sky was painted with soft shades of orange and pink. Families were having picnics, joggers listened to music, and children chased each other across the grass. For the first time in days, Ethan allowed himself to slow down. He sat on a bench with a bottle of water and simply watched the world around him. He felt tired, but in a good way. The type of tiredness that comes from effort, not defeat. He looked around the park and wondered if he had finally begun building a life here. Not a perfect life, but a real one. That was when he heard a voice close to him. "You work at Family Kitchen, right?" Ethan turned, slightly surprised. A man in his mid-30s sat on the bench next to him. He was well-dressed but casual. Clean jacket, jeans, dark hair, and glasses. His expression was friendly. Ethan nodded. "Yes, I do." "I recognized you," the man continued. "I've eaten there a few times. You're new, but you seem to be getting the hang of it." The comment made Ethan smile a little. "I'm trying." The man extended his hand. "I'm Adam." "Ethan." Their handshake was quick and firm. There was something confident yet calm about Adam, the kind of person who seems comfortable wherever he goes. Adam opened his backpack and pulled out a small book, placing it beside him. "You look deep in thought when I walk by. Long day?" Ethan let out a short laugh. "Every shift feels long." "I understand," Adam replied. "Everyone starts somewhere. It takes time to build your life in a big city." Those simple words felt true. Almost too true. Ethan was surprised by how quickly he felt comfortable talking to Adam. He wasn't used to making new connections anymore. For months, survival had been his only focus. Talking felt like a luxury. To his surprise, the conversation continued effortlessly. They spoke about the city, about the rush of life, about the strange feeling of being surrounded by millions of people, yet still wondering where you belong. Adam told him he worked in digital marketing, a world unfamiliar to Ethan, but interesting. He described his job as stressful but creative. Ethan talked about the restaurant, about the challenge of remembering orders and staying calm. They exchanged short stories about difficult customers, strange moments, and small victories. The more they talked, the more Ethan realized how much he had missed this. Real conversation, connection, laughter without pressure. It felt like a break from survival mode. Eventually, Adam checked his watch and stood up. "I should get going," he said. "But it was great talking to you. You're one of the few people I've met here who still looks like they're trying, rather than just enduring." The sentence stuck with Ethan. Trying rather than enduring. It was a compliment, but also a reminder of who he wanted to be. Before leaving, Adam added, "If you ever want to hang out again, I'm usually around here on weekends." Then, without forcing anything, he walked away. Ethan sat still for a moment, thinking about what had just happened. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't life-changing. Not yet. But it felt meaningful, like a door opening slowly. Over the next few days, Ethan returned to work with a slightly different mindset. He started talking more with customers, not just serving them. He asked how their days were, and sometimes shared small comments. It didn't make him faster or less tired, but it made him feel more human. Lena noticed it first. "You seem lighter," she commented one evening while they cleaned the tables. Ethan didn't realize it until then, but she was right. When Saturday came again, Ethan walked to the park after work. He wasn't sure if Adam would be there, and he told himself it didn't matter. He came because the park felt peaceful. But deep inside, he hoped. And Adam was there. He smiled when he saw Ethan approaching. "Hey, here for round 2?" Ethan laughed. "I guess I am." What began as coincidence slowly turned into a habit. Every weekend, after work, Ethan and Adam met at the park. They talked for hours, sometimes about dreams, sometimes about frustration, sometimes about nothing important at all. It didn't matter. It just felt good to talk to someone who understood, someone who listened without judging. Over time, Ethan learned more about Adam's life. He had moved to the city many years ago with nothing, just like Ethan. He worked small jobs until he found his field. He failed many times before he succeeded. His confidence didn't come from a perfect life. It came from surviving an imperfect one. That realization inspired Ethan. If someone like Adam could build a life here, maybe he could too. As weeks passed, something began to change inside Ethan. He still struggled financially. He still worked long hours. Life wasn't suddenly easy, but he no longer felt like a stranger in the city. The restaurant, the apartment, the park, they were becoming part of his story. One evening, as he prepared to leave the restaurant, Mrs. Carter called him aside. "You're doing well," she said. "You've improved a lot. Customers like you. Keep going, and I might consider giving you more hours, maybe even a raise." Ethan felt a rush of pride. This was more than just a job now. It was progress. Later, at the park, he told Adam about it. Adam smiled proudly. "You earned it," he said. "Nobody gave you anything. You worked for it." Ethan looked out over the grass, where children were running and people were talking in the warm evening light. He realized something important in that moment. His life was no longer just about surviving. It was slowly becoming about growing. But life has a way of changing direction when you least expect it. Late one night, after a shift that had gone surprisingly well, Ethan checked his phone as he walked home. He had received an email. Not from the restaurant, not from bills, not from job applications he had forgotten about. It was from a small startup company. They had seen his resume from weeks ago and wanted to schedule an interview for an entry-level office position, the kind of job he used to do before everything collapsed. Something inside him froze. It was an opportunity, maybe a big one. But it was also a risk. The restaurant was finally becoming stable. He had friends, routine, progress. Trying something new meant he could gain more, or lose everything again. He stopped walking and looked up at the night sky. The city lights shimmered like stars trying to shine through darkness. A single question echoed in his mind. Was he ready to start over? Again? Even though he had just begun to find balance? He wasn't sure. He went home with the question still beating loudly in his chest. For the first time since he arrived in the city, Ethan whispered something different before sleeping. Not a promise, not hope, but a fear. What if I fail again? And with that question, the next chapter of his life began to unfold. The email stayed on Ethan's mind the entire night. Even after he turned off the lights and tried to sleep, his thoughts wouldn't quiet down. He kept imagining the two possible futures, one where he took the chance and succeeded, and another where he tried and failed again. Both pictures felt too real. When morning arrived, he didn't feel rested, but he got up anyway. At the restaurant, he tried to focus on the usual tasks, yet his mind kept wandering. He carried plates, took orders, cleaned tables, smiled at customers, but his heart wasn't fully there. Eventually, Lena noticed. "You're quiet today," she said while arranging cups behind the counter. "Just thinking about something," Ethan replied. "Thinking can be dangerous," she said with a smirk. "Try doing instead." Then she went back to work. Her comment hit harder than she probably expected. Ethan realized that he had been thinking too much instead of making decisions. Still, he wasn't ready to tell anyone about the job opportunity. It felt too personal, too fragile, like saying it aloud could break it. During his break, he stepped outside. The sun was high, the street was loud, and people moved with their usual rhythm. Ethan sat on a bench near the entrance and took out his phone again. The email was still there, waiting. He finally replied. He wrote politely, saying he was interested and available for an interview any time. He reread the message several times before sending it. The moment he pressed send, he felt both relief and fear. The decision was made, at least the first step. That evening, when he met Adam at the park, Ethan told him everything. Adam listened quietly, without interrupting. "So, you have an interview," Adam said finally. "That's good." "I don't know if I'm ready," Ethan admitted. "The fact that you're scared means it matters," Adam answered. "The best opportunities feel like that." Ethan looked down at his hands. "What if I fail?" Adam shrugged gently. "Then you try again. Failure only wins if you stop." The words stayed with Ethan. They didn't remove the fear, but they made space for hope beside it. 2 days later, the startup replied with an interview date. It would take place the following week. The rest of the days felt slow. Every shift at the restaurant felt longer, not because the work had changed, but because Ethan knew something else was waiting for him outside these walls. He didn't tell anyone at the restaurant. He didn't want to create expectations. He didn't want to explain if things didn't work out. The restaurant had become a place where he felt safe. Not comfortable, but stable. He didn't want anything to threaten that. When the day of the interview arrived, Ethan woke up early. He ironed the only formal shirt he had and polished his shoes until they looked new. He practiced answers to possible questions in the mirror, adjusting his voice to sound confident, even though his stomach felt tight. On the bus ride to the office building, he tried to calm down by watching the city pass through the window. The tall skyscrapers looked intimidating, almost like a different world from the restaurant and the small apartment. This part of the city was clean, polished, and fast. People wore suits, walked with purpose, and looked like they belonged. Ethan wondered if he could belong here too. The office of the startup was in a modern building with large glass windows. The lobby was bright and smelled of fresh coffee. People were typing on laptops, talking on phones, moving quickly. Ethan felt small, but he stood straight and held his resume tightly. A receptionist guided him to a waiting area. His heart beat louder than the quiet background music. After a few minutes, though they felt like hours, a young woman called his name and led him to a small conference room. 2 interviewers were waiting. They greeted him professionally, but with warm smiles. That helped a little. Still, Ethan felt nervous. They asked about his previous experience, his strengths, his weaknesses, why he wanted to work here, and what he hoped to achieve in the future. Some questions were easy, and he answered confidently. Others were harder, and he had to think carefully. But he didn't lie. He didn't pretend to be someone else. He spoke honestly about his situation, about losing his previous job, about moving to the city, about wanting a chance to rebuild. To his surprise, the interviewers didn't look disappointed. They looked impressed. "We appreciate honesty," one of them said, "and we appreciate determination." After nearly an hour, the interview ended. They told him they would contact him within a week. Ethan walked out of the building feeling strangely calm. He didn't know if he would get the job, but he felt proud. He had shown up. He had tried. He had not let fear stop him. On the bus ride home, he didn't look out the window. He stared at his hands and replayed everything in his mind. Some answers could have been better. Some moments were awkward. But overall, he knew he had given his best. When he arrived at the restaurant for his shift that afternoon, he was exhausted. Not physically, but mentally. Yet something inside him felt lighter. He worked as usual. He took orders, carried plates, cleaned tables. Nothing special happened, and still, everything felt different. At closing time, Mrs. Carter approached him. Ethan expected feedback or instructions, but instead she said, "You've been doing great lately. I'm proud of you." Ethan didn't know what to say, so he just nodded with a small smile. It felt almost painful to hear those words that night, because she didn't know that he might leave, that he might be gone soon if the new job worked out. It made Ethan realize something important. Starting something new sometimes means leaving something good behind. After work, he walked to the park as usual. Adam was sitting on the same bench, reading again. When Ethan approached, Adam looked up and asked quietly, "How did it go?" Ethan sat down slowly. "I did my best." "That's all anyone can do," Adam replied. "Now you wait." Waiting became the hardest part. Every day felt like a test of patience. At the restaurant, Ethan worked as if nothing had changed, but inside, he was counting hours. At night, he stared at his phone before sleeping. At the park, he talked with Adam, but part of his mind was somewhere else. 6 days passed. No email. No call. On the 7th day, just before his shift was about to start, his phone vibrated. For a moment, he didn't want to look. He was afraid of disappointment. But he forced himself to check the screen. It was from the startup. His hands shook as he opened the message. He read it once, then twice, then a third time. The message said, "Congratulations. We would like to offer you the position." Ethan stood frozen in place. The world around him seemed to stop. The noise of cars, the voices of people, the movement of life. All he could hear was his heartbeat. He had done it. After months of searching, after nights of doubt, after everything he had survived, he finally had an opportunity to rebuild his life. But then, something unexpected happened. Along with the happiness came fear. this time stronger than before, because now he had a choice to make. Should he leave the safety and familiarity of the restaurant to try something uncertain again? Or should he stay where things were finally stable? He had wanted this chance so badly, but now that it was in front of him, it scared him more than ever. That night, on the way to the park, Ethan realized something deep and painful. Dreams don't just demand effort, they demand risk. He sat beside Adam, who immediately noticed his expression. "You got the job," Adam said softly. "I can see it on your face." Ethan nodded. "So, what are you going to do?" Ethan didn't answer, because he truly didn't know. And for the first time since he arrived in the city, the future looked both brighter and more terrifying than ever before. Life had become more balanced for Ethan, but balance never meant perfection. There were still difficult days, and one of them arrived unexpectedly on a rainy Thursday morning. The restaurant was busier than usual, and both Michael and Lena had called in sick. That meant fewer workers and more pressure. Mrs. Carter looked tense, but tried to remain calm. "We'll manage," she said. "Let's do the best we can." Ethan nodded, ready to help. But inside, he felt the pressure growing. The morning rush hit like a storm. Customers filled every table. People called for takeout, and the phone rang non-stop. Ethan moved as fast as he could, but mistakes began to happen. A wrong dish delivered to the wrong table. A spilled drink. A customer complaining about waiting too long. For the first time in weeks, Ethan felt the familiar wave of fear. The same fear that once controlled his life. What if I'm not good enough? What if I fail again? What if this job doesn't last? Mrs. Carter noticed his shaking hands and said quietly, "Slow down. Don't fight the day. Work with it." But the words didn't reach him yet. Shortly before noon, a table of office workers grew impatient. One woman snapped, "This is ridiculous. We've been waiting for 20 minutes." Ethan apologized and rushed to bring their order. In the hurry, he didn't notice that the soup bowl wasn't placed properly on the tray. As he set it down, the bowl tipped, spilling a splash of hot soup across the table. No one was harmed, but the shock was enough to silence the entire restaurant. Ethan froze. His heart pounded loudly. His breathing became quick. For a moment, he wasn't in the restaurant anymore. He was reliving the day he lost his previous job, the day he disappointed everyone. Mrs. Carter rushed over and handled the situation gracefully. Within minutes, the table was cleaned and the customers received a discount. Everything looked under control, except for Ethan. "Go take a break," Mrs. Carter whispered. Behind the restaurant, in the small employees area, Ethan sat on a wooden box and buried his face in his hands. The rain outside made a soft tapping sound, but it didn't calm him. He whispered to himself, "Maybe I'm not meant for this life. Maybe I'll always mess things up." A soft knock interrupted him. It was Michael, looking tired but smiling weakly. "I heard what happened," he said. "Just wanted to check on you." Ethan shook his head. "I can't do this. I keep trying, but it never seems to be enough." Michael sat down beside him. "Let me tell you something. Everyone makes mistakes here. Even Lena. Even Mrs. Carter. The only difference is, they don't let mistakes decide who they are." Ethan didn't answer, but he listened. "You're not failing," Michael continued. "You're learning, and learning always looks messy." Those words planted a small seed in Ethan's heart. The two men stood up and returned to the restaurant. Ethan was still nervous, but he pushed himself through the rest of the day. When the last customer left, Mrs. Carter approached him. "You had a difficult day," she said, "but you finished it. That matters more than you think." Then she looked at him closely. "Ethan, your problem isn't skill. It's fear. You're scared of failing, and fear makes everything harder." He stayed silent, but this time, the words hit deep. That evening, Ethan walked slowly home in the rain. He didn't try to hide from the storm. He let it soak him, because he needed to feel something. Anything that proved he was still alive, still trying. When he reached his apartment, he saw a message on his phone. It was from Olivia. "Hey, haven't seen you this week. Just checking on you. I hope you're okay." He closed his eyes. He didn't want pity, but he didn't want distance either. He replied, "Rough day. I don't know what I'm doing anymore." She answered almost instantly, "If you're lost, it means you're moving forward. Lost is just the step before found." Ethan stared at the message for a long time. A few minutes later, she called. Her voice was calm, but caring. "Ethan, I've seen you help others. I've seen you work hard. I've seen you grow. Don't let one bad day make you forget who you are." He exhaled shakily. "I'm just afraid of failing." "We all are," she said softly. "But you're still trying, and that's courage." They talked for nearly an hour about fear, doubt, dreams, and the pressure of starting over. It wasn't a romantic conversation. It was something deeper. Two human beings speaking honestly. Before hanging up, Olivia said, "Come volunteer on Sunday. We need you, and I think you need us too." Sunday arrived, and Ethan joined the volunteers again. He didn't talk much at first, but slowly he opened up. Helping others made him feel stronger. He realized something surprising. The kids looked up to him. They asked him questions, laughed with him, and followed him around. They didn't see weakness in him. They saw someone reliable. After the event, Olivia walked with him toward the subway station. "You did great today," she said. "I didn't do anything special." "Maybe not to you," she replied. "But to the kids, you mattered." Ethan looked away, trying to hide the emotion in his face. Olivia stopped walking and turned toward him. "Listen, life isn't waiting for a perfect moment. Life is the moment, even when it's hard." Ethan finally met her eyes. "I want to change. I really do. I just don't know how." "You already started," she said. "You just didn't notice." Those words became the turning point. That night, Ethan went home, stood in front of the paper on his wall, and wrote, 8. I am allowed to make mistakes. Then, for the first time ever, he added something new below the list. Not a goal, but a statement. I am rebuilding my life, not escaping from it. He said it out loud, even though no one was there to hear it. The rain had stopped outside, and inside Ethan's heart, something heavy had stopped as well. The fear didn't disappear, but it no longer controlled him. He was ready, not for perfection, but for progress. And that was enough. 2 months had passed since Ethan's first day at the restaurant, and the city no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like a classroom, a place where mistakes were lessons and challenges were teachers. He had grown stronger, more confident, yet he knew he was still far from the life he dreamed of. One late evening, after closing time, Mrs. Carter called Ethan into her office. Her expression was serious but not cold. "Sit down," she said gently. Ethan sat, feeling unsure. She took a deep breath. "I want to be honest with you. You've come a long way. You've become reliable, faster, and more confident. Customers appreciate you. I appreciate you." A warm feeling rose in Ethan's chest, but he sensed there was more coming. "However," she continued, "you need to understand something important. This restaurant can give you stability, but it might not give you growth. You have the potential to do more than serve tables." The words surprised him. "I don't understand," Ethan said carefully. "You're smart, disciplined, and good with people. I don't think your journey is meant to end here. I think this place was a bridge, not a destination." Ethan didn't know what to say. He had worked so hard just to survive. The idea of aiming higher felt dangerous, like walking on thin ice. "I don't know what else I can do," he admitted. Mrs. Carter smiled softly. "You're not the only one who sees your potential." She opened a drawer and handed him a business card. It belonged to a training center that helped adults learn new career skills. "Someone recommended you," she said. "Actually, Olivia did." Ethan froze. "Olivia?" Mrs. Carter nodded. "She said you were determined and motivated. She told me you deserved more opportunities." He stared at the card. It was simple, just a name, address, and phone number. Yet it felt like a door, waiting to be opened. "I'm not telling you to leave," Mrs. Carter said. "But if you ever want to build a different future, this might be a way to start." He thanked her quietly and walked home with the card in his hand. The night air was cold, but his mind was burning with thoughts. For years he had lived in survival mode. Now, for the first time, someone was suggesting something more. Was he ready for that? The next afternoon, Ethan met Olivia at their usual volunteering event. They spent the day organizing donations and playing with the children, but Ethan was distracted. Olivia noticed. "Something's on your mind," she said as they walked outside. Ethan handed her the card. "Mrs. Carter gave me this. She said, you recommended me." Olivia didn't deny it. "I did." "Why?" Ethan asked. "Why would you do that?" "Because I see someone who deserves a chance," she said. "Someone who works hard, cares about others, and doesn't give up even when he's scared." Ethan looked away. "I don't know if I can do something like this. It feels risky. What if I fail again?" Olivia stepped closer. Not too close. Just enough for her voice to reach him clearly. "Ethan, life is full of risks. Staying where you are is a risk. Trying something new is a risk. But only one of them gives you a chance to grow." Her words hit him like a wave, frightening and inspiring at the same time. The next day, Ethan stood outside the training center. The building looked modern and serious. People walked in and out with purpose. For 10 minutes, he stayed frozen on the sidewalk, holding the card in his hand, battling the fear inside him. If he walked away now, nothing would change. If he walked inside, everything might change. He finally pushed the door open. The receptionist greeted him politely. Within minutes, he was speaking with a counselor who explained different training paths: business administration, hospitality management, digital marketing, IT support. Each program had a cost, a schedule, and clear outcomes. The price was not low, but not impossible. You don't have to decide today, the counselor said. Take your time. Think about what you want. That night, Ethan spread his bills and savings on the table. He calculated his rent, food, transportation, and remaining income. A training program would mean months of exhaustion, working and studying at the same time. It would also mean choosing growth over comfort. He stared at the numbers for a long time. He whispered to himself, "I'm tired of fighting to survive. I want to build a life." The next day, during lunch break, Ethan took a deep breath and called the training center. "I'd like to enroll," he said. He almost expected regret to hit him afterward, but instead, he felt something else: power. For the next weeks, Ethan lived a double life: full-time restaurant employee and evening student. His days began at 6 a.m. and ended after midnight. His body ached constantly, and sometimes his eyes burned from lack of sleep. And yet, for the first time, every effort felt meaningful. He wasn't running from failure anymore. He was running toward a future. Olivia continued to encourage him, not by saving him, not by solving his problems, but simply by believing in him. Mrs. Carter adjusted his shifts to help him manage his schedule. Michael and Lena cheered him on when he looked exhausted. Ethan realized something powerful. He wasn't rebuilding his life alone anymore. One night, after finishing a difficult assignment, Ethan looked at his wall and added, 9. Growth requires courage. 10. I deserve a future I am proud of. His handwriting was shaky, but his heart was steady. He understood now that risk wasn't the enemy. Fear wasn't the enemy. Quitting was. And he had no intention of quitting. For the first time in years, Ethan went to sleep not dreaming of escape, but dreaming of possibility. The turning point wasn't a magical moment. It wasn't success. It wasn't victory. It was simply the day he decided to bet on himself. And that decision would change everything. Daniel sat alone in his small apartment on a cold Saturday morning. The city outside was full of life: horns, traffic, distant laughter, and the endless movement of people who always seemed to be in a hurry. But today, Daniel was not thinking about the city. He was thinking about himself, his life, and the choices he had made. For months, things had been difficult. He had lost his job, struggled with friendships, and fought constant doubts about his future. Still, he had continued to search for hope. Through his evening language classes, the supportive people he met, and the small progress he made at work. But even with all of that, something inside him remained unsettled. He wanted clarity. He wanted direction. He made himself a cup of tea and sat by the window. The steam touched his face as he stared at the gray sky. How do people become strong? He asked himself silently. How do they keep going when nothing feels easy? The question echoed in his mind for a long time. A message notification appeared on his phone. It was from Mr. Lewis, the manager at the printing shop where Daniel worked part-time. "We need you to come in a little earlier on Monday. There's a big order. Also, good job lately. I can see your effort." Daniel read the message twice. The last sentence surprised him. It was simple, but it warmed him more than the tea in his hands. Someone noticed. Someone believed in him. He wrote back, "Thank you. I'll be there early." After sending it, Daniel leaned back and closed his eyes. For months, he had been waiting for a big change. something dramatic that would suddenly make life easier. But perhaps the real change was already happening, slowly, silently, through his daily choices. He took a deep breath. Maybe progress was not loud. Maybe progress was quiet. That afternoon, he decided to visit Central Park again. Last time he went there, he felt hopeful. Maybe it would help again. When he arrived, the trees were almost bare and the wind was sharp. But the park still felt peaceful. People walked dogs, children played soccer, and a couple sat on a bench talking quietly. Daniel found an empty bench and sat down. He watched the world around him. Nobody looked lost. Nobody looked perfect either. Everyone was simply living. A thought came into his mind. Maybe life is not about being strong all the time. Maybe it's about trying, even when things are hard. He opened his small notebook and began to write, just like he did on the day he first came to the city. Things are still difficult, but I am different now. I'm learning. I'm trying. I'm moving. He stopped for a moment and smiled. He realized something. The city had not changed for him, but he had slowly changed for the city. When evening came, Daniel decided to visit the cafe near his apartment. The same cafe where he once felt too nervous to introduce himself. Now it felt familiar, like a safe place. Inside, he heard a voice behind the counter. "Daniel, good to see you again." It was Sarah, the barista with the friendly smile. He ordered a latte and found a seat. After a moment, Sarah walked over during her break. "How's work going?" she asked. Daniel hesitated, then answered honestly. "It's challenging, but I'm doing better. I think I'm starting to feel confident again." Sarah nodded. "That's how it works. You don't notice progress day by day, but suddenly you look back and realize you are not the same person anymore." Her words felt like a mirror to his thoughts. He thanked her quietly. Before leaving, he surprised himself by asking, "Hey, would you like to join me in the park tomorrow afternoon? Just for a walk?" For a second, he regretted asking. Maybe it was too sudden. Maybe she would say no. But she didn't. "Sure," she said. "I'd like that." When Daniel returned home, the world suddenly felt different. Not because of the cafe, or the message from Mr. Lewis, or even the peaceful time in the park. It felt different because Daniel had made an active decision. He was no longer surviving. He was living. He stood in his small kitchen and looked around. The room wasn't bigger than before. The light wasn't brighter. But inside his chest, there was more space, more hope. He spoke softly to himself. "I'm not done yet. I'm still building myself." There was no dramatic music, no applause, just a quiet, steady confidence. For the first time since arriving in the city, Daniel truly believed something important. He could move forward. And he would. He went to bed that night with calm thoughts. Not because life was suddenly easy, but because he finally understood something powerful. I don't need certainty to continue. I just need courage to continue. Sunday arrived slowly. Sunlight entered Daniel's apartment through the curtains, warm and gentle. It was the first sunny day in weeks, and Daniel felt grateful for it. He woke up early, took a shower, and stood in front of the mirror while brushing his hair. He didn't try to look perfect. He just wanted to look like himself. He thought about the walk he had planned with Sarah from the cafe. For a moment, nervousness touched him again. It was soft, not like before, not the overwhelming fear he once felt. This time, it was just a reminder that he cared. He smiled at himself in the mirror. "I'm doing okay," he whispered. After breakfast, he left his apartment and walked toward the park. The air was cold, but the sun made everything feel brighter. Families filled the sidewalks. People held coffee cups. Children ran ahead of their parents, and cyclists moved quickly along the street. The city looked alive, not loud or chaotic, but full of energy. Daniel arrived at the park 5 minutes early and chose a bench near the lake. A gentle wind moved across the water. He watched ducks swimming, leaving small ripples behind them. He took a deep breath, feeling strangely peaceful. A voice came from behind him. "Sorry if I'm late." He turned and saw Sarah standing there, smiling. She wore a long brown coat and a warm scarf. Her cheeks were red from the cold, and she looked comfortable and relaxed. "You're not late," Daniel replied. "I'm early." They began walking along the path. At first, they talked about simple things, the weather, work, and the city. But soon their conversation grew deeper. Sarah asked, "You moved here not too long ago, right?" Daniel nodded. "Yes, it's been challenging. I came to look for a better life, and I guess I'm still learning how to build one." Sarah listened without interrupting. That made Daniel feel safe to continue. "There were times when I felt completely lost," he said. "No friends, no job, no idea what I was doing. I thought maybe I made a mistake coming here." "And now?" she asked softly. Daniel looked at the path ahead, lined with tall trees. "Now, I still don't have everything figured out, but I'm not lost anymore. I feel like I'm finally moving in the right direction." Sarah smiled. "You should be proud of yourself." Daniel paused. Proud? He hadn't thought of that. But maybe she was right. As they continued walking, they passed by a group of street musicians playing soft jazz. People stood around them, some filming with their phones, others simply listening. The music filled the air with warmth. Daniel and Sarah stopped to listen for a minute. The saxophone was smooth, slow, and emotional. Daniel noticed that the musicians were not young and probably not famous, but they played with passion, as if music was the only thing that mattered. "This city is full of stories," Sarah said. "Some people chase success. Some chase happiness. Some chase something they can't even name. But everyone is chasing something." Daniel nodded. "What are you chasing?" She laughed quietly. "Balance, I guess. I love my job at the cafe, but I don't want to stay there forever. I want to study art therapy one day, help people heal through creativity." Daniel looked at her with admiration. "That sounds meaningful." Sarah shrugged. "Maybe. It's just a dream. I don't know when or how." Daniel answered without thinking too much. Dreams don't need a perfect plan. They need a starting step. Sarah looked at him for a moment, truly looked, and nodded. After walking for nearly 2 hours, they sat on a bench near a garden filled with winter flowers. Daniel took a deep breath and said, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why were you friendly to me the first time I came to the cafe?" "I was nervous, and I barely said anything." She looked thoughtful. "Because I've been that person before. New, unsure, trying hard. I know how much a little kindness can change someone's day." Daniel felt something warm in his chest. Maybe the world wasn't as cold as he once believed. They continued talking about childhood, hobbies, fears, and turning points in life. The conversation flowed naturally, like two people who understood each other without trying to impress or hide anything. At one point, Sarah asked, "Do you miss your home?" "Yes," he answered honestly. "But I'm learning to build a new home here." She nodded slowly. "I think home is not a place. It's a feeling." Later, as the sun began to set, they reached the exit of the park. The sky turned orange and pink, and the city lights began to shine through the evening air. Sarah looked at him kindly. "Thank you for today. I really enjoyed it." "Me too," Daniel replied. Then, surprising himself again, he added, "Would you like to do this again sometime?" She didn't hesitate. "Yes, I'd like that." They said goodbye, and Daniel walked back alone. But he didn't feel alone. The city that once felt cold and distant now felt open and full of possibility. On his way home, he thought about everything: the progress at work, the small confidence he was building, the people he had slowly begun to connect with, the version of himself he was becoming. For the first time, Daniel looked at the tall buildings around him and didn't feel small. He felt part of something, a story, a journey, a city that challenged him but also rewarded him when he didn't give up. When he arrived at his apartment, he opened his notebook and wrote, "Today was simple, but it mattered. I am living my life, not watching it from a distance." He closed the notebook with a smile. Life was still uncertain, but the uncertainty no longer scared him. It inspired him. He was not finished becoming who he wanted to be. He was only getting started. Monday morning came faster than Daniel expected. The alarm rang at 6:30, and for a few seconds, he didn't want to move. The bed was warm, and the room was quiet. But he remembered the message from Mr. Lewis, the big order at work, and the trust that had been placed in him. Daniel got up, dressed quickly, and prepared a simple breakfast before leaving. The streets were busy as usual, filled with workers hurrying toward buses, trains, and offices. But Daniel walked with a sense of purpose. He felt different now. Not perfect, not completely confident, but stronger than before. When he arrived at the printing shop, Mr. Lewis was already waiting. "Morning, Daniel," he said. "Today's going to be a long day. We have a large order from a university. 7,000 printed brochures. We need them finished by tonight." Daniel nodded. It sounded exhausting, but he wasn't afraid of the work. He wanted to show that he could be trusted. The morning was intense. Machines ran constantly, sheets of paper flew through rollers, and Daniel checked each batch carefully for mistakes. Errors could ruin the entire order. His eyes got tired, but he stayed focused. At noon, he finally took a short break. "Good job so far," Mr. Lewis said while handing him a sandwich from the staff fridge. "I know this isn't easy. Most new employees would panic." Daniel smiled lightly. "I want to do things right." You are, Mr. Lewis replied. You've improved a lot. Those words stayed with Daniel. They weren't dramatic, but they were strong enough to push him forward. After the break, the work became even harder. One of the machines began making strange noises. Papers started jamming. The entire order could be delayed or ruined. Damn it, said Mark, one of the senior workers. We don't have time for this. Mr. Lewis tried to fix the machine, but the problem continued. Daniel watched quietly, thinking. Weeks earlier, he had read a manual about the machines because he wanted to understand the shop better. Suddenly, something in his memory connected. Can I try something? He asked carefully. Mark and Mr. Lewis stepped aside. Daniel opened the machine panel and adjusted the paper alignment wheel, a small but important part that often caused jams. He restarted the machine. The paper moved through smoothly. The workers stared at him. How did you know that? Mark asked. Daniel shrugged, a little shy. I read the maintenance manual one evening. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Mark laughed loudly, not mocking, impressed. You read the manual for fun? He asked. Daniel smiled awkwardly. I wanted to learn. Mr. Lewis looked at him proudly. You saved us today. The team worked until late afternoon. Everyone was tired, but they pushed together. At 7:45 p.m., all 7,000 brochures were packed into boxes, sealed, and ready for delivery. The sense of accomplishment filled the shop like warm light. Before going home, Mr. Lewis called Daniel to the office. Sit down, he said. I want to talk to you. Daniel sat, nervous again, but not terrified like he once was. You've been here only a short time, but you've proven that you work hard and that you want to grow. I'm offering you more hours each week and a raise. It isn't huge, but it's a step. Daniel felt something rise in his chest. Relief, gratitude, pride. Thank you, he said quietly. Really, thank you. You earned it, Mr. Lewis replied. On the way home, Daniel was exhausted. His legs hurt, his back ached, and his clothes smelled like printer ink. But he smiled all the way to his apartment. Inside, he took a long shower, changed into comfortable clothes, and sat on his bed with his notebook. He wrote, Today was hard, but today I proved something to myself. Not only that I can survive, but that I can contribute. I can learn. I can solve problems. I'm not just someone who moved to the city. I am someone who belongs here. He paused, thinking. His life still wasn't perfect. His apartment was still small, his income modest, and he still missed home sometimes. But now he understood something. Growth was not about avoiding difficulty. It was about working through it. He closed the notebook, stretched, and lay down. He wasn't done with his journey. There would be more challenges. He knew that. But instead of fearing them, he felt ready. Before falling asleep, he checked his phone. There was a message from Sarah. How was your day? Daniel replied, Very long, very hard, but good. I'll tell you about it next time we meet. She answered instantly. I'll look forward to that. Daniel put the phone down and smiled softly in the dark. The city no longer felt like an enemy. It felt like a mountain, tall, difficult, demanding, but climbable. And step by step, Daniel was climbing. 2 weeks passed after the long and difficult workday at the printing shop. Since then, Daniel's routine had changed little by little. He now worked more hours, earned a better salary, and felt more confident in his skills. Every morning he woke up early, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. His life was still simple, but now it was full of direction. One Saturday morning, Daniel sat in his apartment drinking coffee when he received a message from his teacher at the evening language class. "Congratulations, Daniel. You finished level B2. You're ready to move to the advanced group if you want." For a moment, Daniel stared at the message in disbelief. When he first arrived in the city, he could barely introduce himself in English without hesitation. Now he was being invited to the advanced class. Progress was slow and quiet, but it was real. He leaned back in his chair and smiled. He was becoming the person he had always hoped he could be, step by step. Later that afternoon, Daniel met Sarah again. They walked through the city together, not to the park this time, but through streets filled with bookstores, small restaurants, and little shops. They stopped inside a store that sold art supplies. Sarah picked up a set of paintbrushes. "One day," she said softly, "I'll use these in an art therapy workshop. Maybe not soon, but someday." Daniel looked at her with gentle confidence. "You will. You're already moving toward it, even if the steps are small." She smiled, and her eyes showed gratitude, not only for the words, but because she knew he truly meant them. They continued walking until they reached a quiet rooftop cafe where the city skyline looked huge and stunning. They sat next to the railing where they could see the tall buildings stretching into the sky. "Sometimes," Sarah said, "I think this city is too big for me. Too fast, too competitive, too everything." Daniel nodded slowly. "I used to feel that way every day. I thought the city didn't want me, didn't have space for me. But now I think maybe the city doesn't give anything easily. Maybe it waits to see who's willing to keep trying." "That's a nice thought," she replied. "It's not just a thought," Daniel said. "It's real. I'm living it." They stayed there until the sun began to set. It wasn't a romantic scene from a movie. No dramatic music, no perfect lighting. Just two people quietly sharing time, each following a path of growth and hope. On Monday, something unexpected happened at work. Mr. Lewis called Daniel into the office again. "We're opening a temporary evening shift for the next 2 months," he explained. "And I need someone to coordinate it. Someone responsible. Someone the team respects." Daniel felt his heart beat faster. "Do you mean me?" Mr. Lewis nodded. "You won't be a manager, but you'll be the person in charge during those hours. It comes with another raise." Daniel didn't say anything for a moment. He didn't want to accept just because of pride or fear. He wanted to think clearly. Then he imagined the old version of himself, nervous, unsure, afraid to make mistakes. That version would have said no. But the new Daniel understood something. He still had doubts, but he also had strength. "I'll do it," he said. Mr. Lewis smiled. "I knew you would." The new shift wasn't always easy. Some workers complained, others needed help, and sometimes machines malfunctioned again. But Daniel handled everything with patience. He didn't shout, didn't panic, didn't try to be perfect. He led by example, helping, organizing, and supporting others. And soon, the team trusted him. One night, after everyone left, Mark, the same senior worker who once doubted him, stopped at the door and said, "You're good at this, Daniel. Don't underestimate yourself." Daniel thanked him quietly. Praise didn't make him arrogant. It made him grateful. Weeks passed, and the sadness that once controlled Daniel's life slowly faded. Not because everything was perfect now, but because he had learned how to face life rather than hide from it. He still missed home sometimes, but he didn't want to escape the city anymore. The city had become his challenge, his teacher, and his opportunity. On a peaceful Sunday morning, Daniel returned to the park, the same place where he once wrote about feeling lost. He sat on the same bench near the lake and opened his notebook. He read the old entries. "I don't know who I am here. Maybe I made a mistake coming to this city. I want to change, but I don't know how." Then he turned to the last page and wrote, "I'm not finished. I'm still learning, but I am proud of the person I am becoming." He closed the notebook gently. A voice came from behind him. "Writing again?" Sarah asked. Daniel turned with a smile. Not about fear this time, about progress. She sat next to him, and they watched the lake in silence. The water was calm. Ducks swam slowly. Children laughed in the distance. Nothing dramatic happened. No sudden success. No perfect ending. Just life. Real, simple, honest. Daniel took a deep breath and realized something powerful. He hadn't found happiness by escaping his struggles. He found happiness by growing through them. The city was still big, still fast, still demanding. But Daniel no longer felt small. He had a job. He had hope. He had a future he was building one step at a time. And most importantly, he finally believed in himself.